Hiya guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another Retro RPG. The end of another week, the end of another poll. We've got an absolutely fabulous win for the 1979 Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide. Now this is going to be a PDF review, so we'll be going over to the computer desktop to have a wee look at that in a second. And as usual, I'll be back at the end of the video with some other channel related stuff and some other poll related stuff. But before I do that, I'd like to take a moment to talk about my Patreons, who this week I have been told are 22.3% more likely to roll critical hits. Now we don't know why. I guess the universe just wants to reward them for being wonderful people. And I think these people are wonderful because they help support the channel and make all of this possible. Now if you'd like to join them and help support the channel, or you'd like to see these videos a week early, or you'd like to gain access to one of the other levels of patronage we've got, then there's a Patreon in the description down below. If you check it out, it'd be very much appreciated. But anyway, let's get on and have a look at the 1979 Dungeon Master's Guide. So, this is the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide, which came out in 1979, although this is the 1983 version with a fresh cover, because the original version, called the Ifrit version, had this cover. But, as with the Player's Handbook, when I covered that, this is the one I'm more familiar with. This is when I got into role-playing and borrowed these books off a friend and games mastered only like 2-3 weeks after I first played Dungeons & Dragons. Got straight into it. Now, the Dungeon Master's Guide itself is a bit of a mixed bag. Unlike later versions, you need it to play the game. Because in 5th edition, I think going back as far as 2nd edition, if you had the Player's Handbook, you could play Dungeons & Dragons. Everything was in there. But in this version, the 1st edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, the hit tables are in the Dungeon Master's Guide, so you can't even do combat without owning this book. And everything else in there is fleshing out rules. There's lots and lots of handy stuff in here. Some absolutely brilliant stuff as well. But I do find it kind of weird that there's a section which you absolutely need, and there's all this extra stuff. But let's have a look at the back cover. So, all the information you need to referee your Advanced Dungeons & Dragons game is in this book. Whether you're running a single adventure or masterminding a complete campaign, the Dungeon Master's Guide is the absolute best source for information. There's no need to guess the rules. You learn spells, monsters, travel, magic lists, and combat rules. And inside, well, the presentation's quite nice. It's obviously not as nice as desktop publishing later. The fonts do seem a bit blocky, and there's a lot of text in here. There's lots crammed in on every page. And the artwork's sort of pencil stuff, but I like it. It brings back so many fond memories for me. Continuing through, we've got a foreword by Mike Carr. The contents page. Tables and charts locating all of those. And then a preface by E. Gary Gygax, talking about how this came about. And then we're into an introduction, talking through what the game is, approaches to playing Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, what dice are, the probability of rolling a 3d6, what you're likely to get. Obviously, the average is going to be around a 10 or 11, 12 sort of region. And that's the average sort of stat for a character. Why they felt the need to show a bell curve in here, I don't know, but it's kind of handy to see what the averages will play out at. Use of miniature figures with the game. Aids to playing it. Creating characters, so generation of character scores. Talking about those, different methods, what the characteristics are. So, player character non-professional skills. Starting level of experience for player characters. Character aging, disease, and death. Including the sort of famous what chance you stand of contracting various diseases. Death due to age. Character abilities explaining strength, exceptional strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, and charisma. I was looking at something fairly recently where it showed exceptional dexterity for thieves. And that's something I've always thought was missing from 1st and 2nd edition. Exceptional strength being a matter of, if you rolled an 18 and you were a warrior class, then you rolled percentile on top of that. So your 18 strength wasn't the same as an average person with a strength 18. One of the other classes. It was more than that. But I didn't see why fighters got to have that and other classes didn't. Why doesn't a thief get to be extra dexterous? Why doesn't a wizard get to be more intelligent, etc., etc.? Exceptional stats, I think, should have been for all of the classes to allow them to be absolutely exceptional in their area. But that's just me waffling on. We've got player character races. Talking through the different standard races, so dwarves, elves, gnomes, half-elves, halflings, and half-orcs. The character classes, including chances of all of them, so you can roll up sort of your standard NPCs. We've got the assassin, and then we've got more detailed rules, so things like the paladin's warhorse, spying with assassins, spy failures, thieves and assassins setting traps. As I said, lots of extra rules here, which really flesh out the game. You can make this stuff up, but it's really, really handy to have. The monstrous player characters. We've got lycanthropy. Change tables are what chance you stand of changing under various phases of the moon. We've got the alignments. Alignment with respect to the planes. Alignment language. Now this is a really weird one as well, something which kind of has faded away over time. The idea that if you're a good aligned character, then you share a language with other good aligned characters, no matter what race you are. Which is an interesting idea. I don't quite like it, but I can see why they put it in. So if you get a party of different races, they're all going to be able to speak the same language. As long as they're all aligned similarly. Rules for changing alignment. We've got player character starting money, their expenses, value and reputed properties of gems and jewellery. So if you're selling on fancy stones or gemstones, what you'll get. Gem properties. We've got notes regarding the magical properties of gems and herbs. Armour class and weapons, going through the different types of armour. And then we're on to hirelings. Lots of section on hirelings, what professions they'll have, descriptions of those. Dwarven smiths are 3 times more efficient and cost 10 times as much. Mercenary soldiers, artillerists. Sages and their ability. Different alignments, the hit points they'll have, what races they are, what kind of employment they're under. How they can discover information for you. Non-human sages. And then we're on to henchmen. Now this is something I really like from 1st and 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, which kind of went away. The idea that you could hire people to go on your adventures. And that's really quite brilliant, because as you go up levels, having these people, creating a large war party, people to support you, and more especially to when you've got yourself, your fighter's keep, your wizard's tower and whatever, you've got a bunch of people to serve in that and protect it while you're away adventuring. And it's something for your characters to spend their money on. In later editions, there's so little to spend your money on. 5th edition, you end up just stacking up cash and cash and cash and having nothing to do for or with it. But in this, you'd be paying out people's wages, you'd be buying them equipment, you'd be buying your castle. I love all that. I like that they've kind of brought it in for the 2024 version of Dungeons & Dragons with the fortresses or whatever it's called. So this is something I miss from the early editions. While 3rd edition is my favourite, I do accept that 1st and 2nd edition had this wonderful, wonderful feature that just kind of went away. Carrying on through, we've got different stuff about henchmen, loyalty of them, and allied creatures. We're then on to time. So, talking about travelling around, how time will flow differently to time in the dungeon. Character spells, so day-to-day acquisition of cleric spells. Acquisition of magic user spells, talking through how will that work. Spells beyond those at the start. Recovery of spells, spell casting. Tribal spellcasters, so explaining that the character classes don't necessarily make up everything that's in the game, that there are more in the world than that. We've got spell explanations, different types of spells, including magic circles here. We've got the druid spells listed out, magic user spells, illusionist spells, the adventure. So we start talking about adventures in the outdoors. And basically this is what they included in the BECMI set, in the experts box, where they started to explain about travelling around. So you can have a dungeon where you're just exploring rooms, or you can create what they call a hex crawl, where you're exploring different hexes on the map, and that's how you're exploring the area. So this really goes through a hex crawl, details it out. Some nice little artwork there, describing how the hexes work, different types of terrain, procedure for lost parties, aerial travel, flying mounts and speed. I like that they go into different types of adventure. This really fleshes out the game. But it feels kind of weird the way it's crowbarred in. We've already gone through lycanthropy before we're going on to detailing about how to run adventures. It does all seem like it's very thrown in here. So we've got different demons, dinosaurs, waterborne adventures, different types of travelling. On waterborne adventures we've got different things for ships, so the different types of hull, sizes of them, etc. Capturing ships, breathing underwater, movement, vision, combat underwater. We've got travel in the known planes of existence. So we go through those, detailing out how infravision and ultravision work, how invisibility works, listening at doors. And then we're on to the combat section, so explaining all the rules for it, including things like inflicting damage, encounter reactions, parleying, firing missiles, spellcasting when you're melee, when you're using battle maps, so you can see if you're using hexes or squares, what the various areas are, whether you're flanked or not. Breaking off from combat, an example of it. We've got the combat tables, so we can see how likely characters are to hit. This is the part you absolutely need for combat, which isn't detailed in the player's handbook at all. So, Assassin's Table for assassinations, attack matrices for monsters, psionic versus psionic in mental combat, psionic attack versus defenseless psionic. Just absolutely everything, all crammed in here. What have we got here? Attack form and number. Saving throws, we detail those. Different insanities. Experience points values of monsters. What you do when you gain experience levels. Detailing about campaigns. So we've got social classes and ranks in campaigns, and towns and cities social structure, explaining all that, economics, duties, fees, tariffs, taxes. So allowing you to flesh out your world quite seriously. Monster populations and placement. So this is teaching you how to flesh out your world a bit more, how to create your dungeons. You know, placement of monetary treasure, placement of magic items, long sections on this. Territory development by player characters. We've got a sample dungeon, going through explaining about it, the first dungeon adventure. A sample of play between different characters. Non-player characters, their sort of different features, so their personalities, what their intellect's like. What we got? Language determinations, everything to flesh out NPCs here. Non-player character monsters and organizations. Construction and sieges and mining. So basically building up your fortress, your fighter's keep, your wizard's tower, whatever. Even got rules here for handling troublesome players. Multiple characters for a single player, intervention by deities, fleshing out all of this. Now, one of the things here is we have the various weapons, which are more modern. So we've got derringers, shotguns, scatterguns, and it explains how to connect those up to Boot Hill. But over the page, we've got Gamma World Armor to AD&D Armor class. So we're converting over the other TSR games of the time, Boot Hill and Gamma World, and letting them work with AD&D, creating a multiverse, something we're very keen on these days. Got magical research, magic items, different treasure, and this is the part that I picked up Dungeon Master's guides for in later editions, to get the access to all the magical items. I know I bought it in 2nd edition and 3rd edition for that. So we've got long tables of different magic items, and then we've got explanations of all those. As we flick through loads of pages, treasure rings, rod, staves, and wands, miscellaneous magic, different types of treasure, so much miscellaneous magic as we flick through all these pages. Periapts of foul rotting, periapt of health, rope of entanglement, Baba Yaga's hut, Jacinth of inestimable beauty from the world of Greyhawk, apparently, the orb of dragonkind. Just so many different things here. Then we're on to tables for adding powers to magic items. If you want to not use one out of the book, you want to create your own magic item or artifact, we've got tables here so you can be selecting different things from it. Side effects. Got some classic magic items there. +1 swords. +2 axe of throwing. And then we're on to the appendices. So random dungeon generation. And loads of tables you can roll on that and generate your own dungeons. A very nice thing to have. Random monster encounters. So different monsters, all the tables for that. Loads and loads, lots of information about the different monsters. Waterborne encounters, various random monster tables for that. Again, a nice piece of art. Imicrol the Chaotic. I have no idea who that is. Apparently they frequent the Green Griffin. Random generation of creatures from the lower planes. Then we've got population, alphabetical recapitulation of monsters with experience point values. So a whole bunch of tables, basically like a short summary of the monster manual. A whole load of pages of this. And then we're back onto dungeon dressing. So adding traps to it, adding different things that you might find, lay around, including a random sock. Herbs, spices, and medicinal vegetables. Now the effects of all these different things. Conjured animals, summoned monsters. Inspirational educational reading. Again, found this absolutely fascinating because there are so many classic things here. Edgar Rice Burroughs, the Felucidar series, the Mars series, and the Venus series. Who else we got? August Derleth, Lord Dunsany. The Conan series, Fritz Lieber, H.P. Lovecraft, of course, Michael Moorcock for Stormbringer and Stealer of Souls. Fred Saberhagen for The Changeling Earth. Roger Zelensky, and then it mentions the large influences are De Camp and Pratt, REH, Fritz Lieber, Jack Vance, H.P. Lovecraft, and A. Merritt. But all of the above authors, as well as many not listed, certainly helped shape the form of the game. Cumbrance of standard items, protective items, different potions, a glossary of terms, which I found kind of useful because while many of these I know, it was nice to see terms laid out. Because while I knew the term Monty Hall, I didn't know that they defined it here. A campaign or the DM running it, which greatly excessive amounts of treasure and or experience points are given out. And we've got things like phylactery, explaining what that is, because that's a word most of us probably didn't know before we played Dungeons & Dragons. An afterword, an index, an advert for Gen Con there, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons game family, some tables for your NPCs, and that's us at the back. Now, as I said, it's a very mixed bag. There's stuff in there which is hugely useful. There is stuff in there which really teaches the Games Master some fantastic stuff. And there's some stuff in there which just seems to be in there because it was in previous editions, it was in various books, and Gary Gygax liked it. So there's many pages in there which I don't think you'd look through that often, but there's so much absolutely vital to the game, and there's loads and loads which really educate a Games Master how to run a game. It's fantastic stuff.
So, that was the 1979
Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide. And I feel like that book's very much a mixed bag. Because while there's some great stuff in there, like the Dungeon Master's Guide since, it does keep hostage those few pages which you can't play the game without. Without the rules for combat, you can't play the game. So you need that book. I much prefer the way they've done it in Dungeon Master's Guides ever since, where you can play Dungeons & Dragons from the player's handbook, but there's so much useful in the Dungeon Master's Guide that you want to get it. I really don't like this idea of you need to buy it just for this few pages. Anyway, that won the poll this week with a massive 37% of the vote. And it was ahead basically from the second day, although as the first day ended it was a three-way tie between the three top. Because what ends up second place is the James Bond 007 RPG on some 32% of the vote, and it rallied somewhat, it fell behind, rallied, but it was always going to be AD&D DMG which won. In third position we've got Dragonbane from Hirelings on 20%, and way back behind was the Dark Tech sourcebook for Dark Conspiracy, which came in on 11%. And I'm going to keep putting Dark Conspiracy stuff in, because Games Designers Workshop stuff's fantastic, and I've got so much love for that old game. But we'll keep putting in the poll, and eventually we'll get to cover it. Anyway, as usual, these are all wiped out of the poll, and we're on to a fresh set of options for a Retro Adventures poll. And none of these I think have been in the poll before. This is a completely fresh selection. So first up we've got Cabin Fever for Cyberpunk 2020, which is by Atlas Games. It's not an R. Talzorian Games adventure. It's one of the licensed ones. And Atlas Games has done so much interesting stuff that we've covered on the channel before that I really think this will be fun to cover. But we shall see if it wins. Next up we've got Ice Demon for Dark Conspiracy, which came out in 1992. Now, this is Games Designers Workshop. This is Dark Conspiracy. As I said, I'm going to keep putting things in until it eventually wins. And I absolutely adore Dark Conspiracy. I remember playing this adventure and it being quite horrific as we went through. Sci-fi horror, some great stuff in here. Third up, we've got Grace Under Pressure for Call of Cthulhu from Pagan Publishing, which came out in 1993. Now, this is an adventure, as far as I know, which is set all under the sea. It's a modern day adventure and you're using pre-built player characters. As it's a sort of one-shot, it's not part of a campaign. And Pagan Publishing did the wonderful Delta Green. So I think there could be a lot interesting in this. I think it'll be a really interesting adventure if it wins. And finally we've got Mediterranean Cruise for Twilight 2000 from Games Designers Workshop in 1988. Because I realised it's been 2 years since I covered The Last Submarine. And this is the second part in the Last Submarine campaign. So I probably should put it in and we'll work our way through this campaign. It's only 3 parts and I think it'll be worthwhile. But only if it wins. The choice is now in your hands. What else have I been up to? Well, usual, I'm releasing stuff on DrivethruRPG. You'll find a link to it down below. Even if you just click on the link, I'll get credit for anything you buy on DrivethruRPG, so you're helping the channel out just by clicking that link. But check my stuff out. But if you're interested in lots and lots of my stuff, remember, patrons of LED and librarian status get access to absolutely everything on a Google Drive. There's some 600 booklets on there now. So if you're interested in more than a couple of things, it's probably worth subscribing to that, as the monthly subscription is going to be less than the price of a couple of these books. So check that out as well. Patreon in the description down below. And finally, over on RPG Gamer, well, I've finished covering the Young Jedi Adventures and I'm now working my way through the stats for Skeleton Crew. And there's so much in this series, brand new stuff, so I'm working my way through all that. It's going to take me a few weeks to get through just the 8 episodes of that. It was a really fun series and I'm enjoying working the way through. So if you love the Star Wars D6 system, check out rpggamer.org and you can comment on the stats that I'm doing. Add in your suggestions on how to make these more perfect representations of what's going on in that series. But anyway, as usual, I think I've been waffling on for quite long enough. So thank you very much for watching. As always, most of all, you look after yourselves. And I'll catch you later. Bye now.